Welcome to the Cook Group's podcast, What's Cooking in Litigation, with your host, Brian Wacker. In each episode, you'll meet industry leaders, innovators, and educators in litigation. We'll discuss the latest advancements, efficient practices, and strategic updates. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, cookgrouplegal.com. Now here's the host of What's Cooking in Litigation, Brian Wacker.
Hello, and welcome back to What's Cooking in Litigation. I am your host, Brian Wacker, and this is our third episode. Each week, we will continue to discuss latest trends in litigation and bring some folks on who we think are some of the leading, sharpest minds in the industry, including those within our own firm. Today's a very special episode because it's someone who will be joining me. He's my friend. He's my partner. He's an 18 handicap, Joe Hargraves. Joe, welcome to the show.
I think it's more like 16, but sure.
Yeah, whatever. Very special bald guy edition of the show. So let's jump on into this. Yeah. Joe, we've been talking the last couple weeks with Carrie Ann and Hanson. We heard a lot about their practice and background. Can you give us a little bit of your background and how you got to this point?
Sure. For better or worse, I've spent most of my career practicing in toxic torts, the last 15 years being asbestos litigation. Worked in basically every small county in Illinois and Missouri over the last 15 years. I started in general civil litigation, mostly defense side. I did a little criminal litigation, but roughly 7 years ago now, I left what was the firm that we were at, Herzog Krebs, and started a St. Louis office for what is now the Cook Group. And since then, my practice has gone national. Do a lot of national counsel work for corporations that are routinely sued in asbestos litigation.
So for the uninitiated among us, or the folks who just don't know quite as much about mass tort work, why is it that asbestos litigation and mass tort work is such a big industry here in the Midwest?
Yeah. Was that me?
Oh, that's all right. Fire on through it.
Yeah. So, we in the Midwest in St. Louis sits right in the center of three of the biggest jurisdictions for asbestos litigation. Most notably, and the one that for anyone who's nerdy enough to know this stuff that will ring a bell, is Madison County, Illinois. Some 20 plus years ago now, there was a extraordinary verdict in Madison County involving U.S. Steel that led to the boom of the litigation, which ostensibly morphed from there to take over St. Clair County, Illinois. St. Louis City gets quite a few cases, but it is pretty hard to practice in St. Louis, in the St. Louis area right now, and not have touched or heard of toxic torts or asbestos litigation. I guess for those who aren't familiar, the east side or the east suburbs of St. Louis are where most of the manufacturing was. A lot of oil refineries and steel mill over there that generated a lot of cases.
And just right over my shoulder, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Now you've got the view of Busch Stadium. I've got the arch, but
I can see the arch as well, but my camera's not pointed that way.
That's right. You're not as vain as I am to put it in your background.
Right.
All right. So I've been practicing almost as long as you have in the area, and I feel like I've been told since the moment I started that asbestos litigation and toxic tort litigation it's on its last breath. I've been told that for 15 years, and it seems like it's going as strong as ever.
Yeah, I started in asbestos litigation specifically in 2010, and at that point, the people I was working with said we've got about 5 more years of this left. And I remember emails going out every year that would be like, you wouldn't believe they're setting cases out all the way to 2015 now, or 2016, and now it seems it's been a combination of improvements in science in terms of identifying where the cancer is coming from in the plaintiffs. And there have been, various rulings and decisions in the litigation that have created more life to it. And plaintiffs' firms are creative and they are good investigators, and they've found more defendants, and it seems to keep going. I think right now, those with their finger on the pulse of it say we've got, roughly 15 to 20 years left of it. We'll see.
That gets us to retirement. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, so you talked about there's, the firms are finding, you say new defendants. Obviously, they're looking for new sources of potential recovery. We're starting to see that with different sources of liability for other products out there, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that asbestos litigation has taught plaintiffs' firms, especially in this area, is that often they will make the argument science doesn't really matter in this situation. The unique thing about asbestos litigation that's really given it life is it has a signature disease, which is mesothelioma, which only has one known cause. These other toxic torts that we're going to talk about don't share the same benefit, but everybody is always looking for the next asbestos litigation. I don't know that exists. That may be a unicorn. We're talking about the biggest litigation in the history of the United States and in the world. So I don't know if you're going to repeat that no matter what the exposure is.
Well, so before we got on here, you promised me not to ask you this question, but I'm going to ask you it anyway. One of the things I hear a lot, and it's not just from you and from folks in our firms, but from elsewhere, is that the next landscape could be something called PFAS. Just tell me what PFAS means.
Like, I'm not going to insult you and the listeners, but I think we all know what PFAS means. No, I don't have the actual definition of that acronym in front of me, so I'm not even going to try it. But PFAS is a shorthand. PFAS is a shorthand for a group of chemicals that are commonly known as forever chemicals, or microplastics would kind of fall into that category too. But it's a class of chemical that has been found to be in just about every product that any of us have touched in our entire lives. Getting a lot of publicity right now because of the EPA's recent ban of the use of some of these things. The litigation is probably, since asbestos litigation took off is probably one of the ones that looks most likely to replace asbestos litigation, but it's still very early in it.
So you talked about the EPA. I guess was it a new designation that as a hazardous substance, or what is it about PFAS and the recent regulations or whatever that is given, I guess, some life to some of this?
Yeah, I don't know if it's given it life necessarily as so much as it's pretty rare, as I understand it, for the EPA to say to outright ban something like this. And that's what happened. If you think about it, asbestos has only recently and in piecemeal form been banned by the EPA. So it's sort of reactionary. Although if you talk to and you listen to some of the scientists in this area, they're not even sure what the EPA is banning, because one of the tough things about the class of PFAS chemicals is how do you isolate and figure out what is what out of it. So I think what that ban has done to kind of get the ball rolling is it gives the plaintiff's side of this thing something to point out and say, look, even the EPA is saying that these things are harmful and they shouldn't have been or shouldn't be in our drinking water or in our various products that we use in day-to-day life.
So with the massive disclaimer that there's actually no conclusive expert evidence on this to show that it actually causes any of these problems. What are the potential sort of avenues that you're seeing that folks are going to try to claim that these PFAS or forever chemicals even cause?
Yeah, well, so there's several diseases. I think there's an article that was published a few years ago now where a group tried to test all these potential diseases that come out of it. The big headline has been, I think, probably the one that people have seen in the New York Times was the drinking water, right? The Camp Lejeune litigation and the firefighters foam stuff that came out. I think what is really making everybody's ears perk up is the fact that then you can extrapolate that across hundreds of products. The main problem they have right now is causation. How do you link individual chemicals to individual harm and then tie it to a manufacturer of the product that included the chemical? So right now, really, that is still way up in the air. There are a couple of big causation decisions that have happened that if you go to any PFAS conference, you will hear somebody talk about those two decisions, but they may be the only two decisions that have happened. The real litigation right now seems to be false advertising claims, which I'm sure we can get into in more detail, but I think the highlight there is the reason that looks promising from the plaintiff side is there may be insurance money behind those false advertising claims.
Sure. So, I mean, I think you called, and I've heard this term before too, probably from you because you're the smartest person I know,
Sure.
But you called asbestos litigation sort of the unicorn because it was one of these, it is that sort of rare type of litigation where you're able to tie a very specific strain of a disease to a very specific something that was used in specific equipment, and that there is an actual proven causation sort of, or at least in a lot of ways, there's nothing else you could find to say that it would cause this, right? Here,
Yeah.
we don't have that. But in the same breath, we've seen in asbestos litigation, you see, whether you want to call them clever or earnest or maybe working on the wrong side of good faith, that plaintiffs' attorneys have tried to tie other diseases that don't have that unicorn status with mesothelioma or with asbestos. Do you see that sort of maybe trying to take hold in PFAS or something that could ultimately become kind of the next route?
Yeah, I mean, well, so when I mentioned the list of diseases, I mean, there's stuff that I'm not smart enough to know whether this even qualifies as a disease, but high cholesterol is on there. There's, and it turned out that no, actually, the years of bad diet had more to do with the high cholesterol than.
I don't believe it.
Right. So, I mean, both of us have dabbled in some benzene exposure cases, and there's a very specific form of lymphoma that comes out of that. There just isn't anything like that for PFAS now. So there is this struggle that I hear in these various conferences you attend. You hear the struggle for anybody to tie this to anything. And this is where, I literally sat in a conference and heard a rather well-known plaintiff's lawyer from the East Coast say, like, the science won't matter when it comes down to it.
Right.
And, I think we should all probably hope that's not true, although, if you read the news and pay attention, that probably is true to some extent. The thing that I hear the scientists I've heard talk about it struggle with is how to even characterize what they're talking about. There's such an infinite number of what would qualify as a PFAS chemical or a forever chemical that they have trouble even saying what it is they're actually referring to when they refer to it. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I think the reason the false advertising thing seems like a good avenue is because there's less science involved in that. It's just kind of a soft sell on that. But the problem those have run into and why those haven't been successful is most of them don't actually have any harm, no damages to claim.
Right. What it reminds me of in a lot of ways is our senior partner that you and I used to work with. We had a client that was sued for the presence of something called bisphenol A, which kind of has this same sort of ubiquitous nature where it's basically in everything. And for years, plaintiffs' attorneys were trying to find some sort of causal link between it and folks who had it in whatever products, specifically baby bottles was the big thing that it was at the time. And when they weren't able to do that, they kind of ran with that false advertising, state consumer practice line, because one, there was, as you say, more viable insurance policies behind that. But two, it's like you also say, it's softer ground because really you don't need the science to say that there was false advertising. You just need whatever out there in the ethos to gin up some sort of a concern. And then all of a sudden the lack of a disclosure or something on it can lead to some serious exposure problems or serious liability problems.
Yeah. I mean, it's not too different from these asbestos claims, although, again, they don't have the back of 20 to 30 years of litigation behind them. So it's a little harder, but it's the same idea of like, we'll get this on file and see what happens. So far, the only thing that's happened with the false advertising claims is they've been dismissed. It's funny you mentioned that too. At the most recent PFAS conference I did, there was somebody who mentioned those specific baby bottle cases and how a lot of these claims kind of mirror that, although I think the science is a little bit better in that it exists here.
Well, be careful what you say. I mean, that guy he was from Mizzou, so he's close by. You might be hearing you talk about his junk science. So if you did mention, you've been to a couple of these conferences, you've spoken at them. I mean, this is a big enough issue to where there's a lot of people preparing for it. And if you had sort of your crystal ball and you're talking to, an insurer or a C-suite folks at places that use these in their products, what are you telling them at this point?
Well, I mean, I think it's the same thing you would tell any product manufacturer is, follow the regulations on the book. There's no roadmap on how to totally avoid these things. At this point, you're not going to put the genie back in the bottle in terms of what's going on in the past, but the EPA has done somewhat of a favor in their regulations. Following those regulations and getting good advice on how to do it would be the best you can do right now. As for the false advertising claims, I don't know that there's a couple cases that I read through recently that were unavoidable when when the basis of the suit is you say something like we're providing a quality product, and they sue you because how could it be quality if you have a microplastic in it? Well, what are you going to do?
Right.
So there's not much to do there. I think what fascinates me about this in general, though, is how many different ways people are reaching to make this a thing. So at this point, in terms of, if you're a manufacturer of a product or a producer of a product, as long as you're following regulations, you have to let the legal system play out. And as unsatisfying as that can be, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Do you see it as in asbestos litigation particularly, there are some hot spots of litigation. Would you think it would be natural that litigation like this would proliferate in those hot spots like New York City, Philadelphia, Southern Illinois, Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, so we're already seeing it. South Carolina is a hot spot, and they're already filing cases there because of Camp Lejeune. I mean, I think we're certainly going to see it in New York and probably in St. Louis soon enough. I mean, it's just a matter of the way these things go is it usually starts east and spreads to us. So I think we're,
like any good trend,
right? These places are hotspots for a reason, and that's where these suits are going to end up if they're successful.
Right. All right. Well, I know this has been very difficult for you. You were very nervous about this entire experience. And
As you can tell. Yeah.
I know. And it like being next to me and having to compare our faces is probably going to be very embarrassing for you.
Yeah.
But if you had one sort of final thought before we close up on PFAS, what would it be?
If I had one final thought,
just the one,
what would it be? Nobody knows what they're talking about yet. So don't let anybody fool you.
Including you, right?
Yeah. Perfect. Including me, especially.
All right. Well, Joe, I appreciate you taking the time. I know that you are probably the second busiest person in this office, so your time is incredibly valuable. So thanks for joining us on this. And for folks at home, that is our third and probably our best episode so far of What's Cooking in Litigation. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you found this discussion helpful, please leave comments, leave us some feedback online. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any ideas or questions for a future show, please let us know. And in the meantime, take care and stay informed.
You've been tuning in to the Cook Groups podcast, What's Cooking in Litigation, with your host, Brian Wacker. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, cookgrouplegal.com. Thank you for sharing this show with others.